Sok szeretettel köszöntök mindenkit. Az Élet virágai ezúttal Londonból jelentkezik, ahova Judy Hall meghívására érkeztünk. A Szófia Stúdió egész csapata eljött ide, hiszen egy különleges szemináriumon vehettünk részt 2012. 12. hó 12-én. Judy Hall a világ egyik legismertebb írója, akinek eddig több mint 40 könyve jelent meg, és a legismertebb a Kristálybiblia, eddig 1 millió példányban fogyott el. Magyarországon 8 könyve jelent meg magyarul, mindegyiket meg lehet találni a könyvesboltokban, és most egy beszélgetés következik, méghozzá a legkedvesebb tanítványával, Griga Zsuzsannával.
Good morning, Judy. Thank you very much for taking the time and giving us this potential to have an interview with you. And I'm going to ask the first question about your best-selling book, The Crystal Bible, which I believe has been sold in over 1 million copies, which is also very, very, very popular in Hungary, and it has been translated to zillion languages. How did the idea come to you that you need to write this book?
It was because I couldn't find a book like it. I had been using crystals really since I was a child, and especially once I started doing astrology, I would put the crystals on the chart. But I didn't necessarily even know what the crystals were. It was completely intuitive. And when I'd got so many crystals, I used to buy them in a very strange little shop where they were in oil drums, and he would, the man behind the counter would say, "You go away and find out what it is. I'm not telling you." And so I had all these crystals that I was putting on charts, not really knowing what I was doing. It was completely intuitive. And I'd got so many, I wanted to know what they were. And I was looking for a book and there wasn't one. So I had to then go and find out what they were. I knew what they did because of what I'd been using them for, but I also knew they were doing more. So I asked all the people I knew who worked with crystals, and I tried to bring all the knowledge together that resonated with me. I didn't want anything that didn't feel right to me, because I wanted to give people my perspective on it. And luckily I had a publisher. I'd done a couple of crystal books for her, just with very straightforward crystals. And I said to her, "Oh, I really want to do this directory that gives people the healing properties." And she said, "I've got the Bible series. Would you like to do it for me?" And that's how it happened.
How was the process going on while you were writing the book? So what was happening? How hard was it? Can you tell me about it?
It was quite hard in some respects, partly because of doing the research and trying to get the right names and the right sort of energy behind what I was doing, but partly because as soon as I thought I'd got it done, new crystals would come out and I'd have to start again, and we kept trying to squeeze more and more into the book. So I think it started off with 200 and we ended up with 250. And that's what's happened ever since. You know, I've just done the 3rd volume, completely different crystals. Volume 2 had over 200. Volume 3's got over 250 again. And I've still got more crystals that I just can't squeeze in. So that's the difficult bit, is keeping up with all the new ones and having time. I work with groups and we look at what the properties are, we check them out. And it's getting the time to do that. That takes lots of time.
Yes, it's interesting that you mentioned the new crystals. The new crystals are resurfacing. Why do you think this is happening, that there are so many new crystals?
I think it's because we are having a shift of consciousness. And the crystals that are appearing now, although there's some old ones that are coming back, they're about grounding the energies. But the completely new ones are about a shift of vibration, a shift of frequency, whatever words you want to put to it. Some people call it ascension. But I think really it is about raising consciousness. And these new high vibration crystals just take you up to a whole different level.
Could you tell me how you became a karmic astrologer? How you became an astrologer?
That was one of those things that I couldn't avoid. It wasn't me making a choice. The first astrology lesson I went to was because someone I knew, I was at the Spiritualist Church doing my psychic development, and this lovely man said to me, I'm doing a local authority evening class. I'm short of people. Will you come and make the numbers up? So I actually learnt astrology to make the numbers up, which was really funny.
A reinkarnációs élmény átformálása az élet forgatókönyvének a megváltoztatását foglalja magában. Ez jelentheti azt is, hogy a forgatókönyvet más kifejlettel játsszuk újra. Talán szükség van arra is, hogy más szempontból szemléljük az eseményeket. A múlt efféle megváltoztatása a jelenlegi élményeken, tapasztalatokon is módosítani fog.
But what happened was I went to an intermediate class, which was very good, because if I'd gone to the basic doing the calculations, I'd have never got any further. And he put a chart up on the board, and I looked at it, and although I didn't know what the symbols meant, I knew what the chart meant. And it turned out later it was General Patton's chart. And I said, it's a soldier with the soul of a poet. And instead of saying, what a load of rubbish, as many astrologers, because remember this is over 45 years ago, and astrology then was, this is your character, this is what will happen to you. It wasn't, there was very little karmic astrology around in England. I mean, there was a bit more in the States. So Bob said, where did that come from? And I said, well, that thing up there and that thing over there, that's the soul of the poet. This is the army, the warrior. And I said, in other lives, he was both. Because I was totally, by that time, into other lives. I'd always had visions, pictures of my other lives, other people's lives. And so that was when I realised the chart could actually show you not the lives, but the pattern behind the lives. And not that long after that, probably 6 months, a year, I went to see my mentor, Christine Hartley, who was Dion Fortune's literary agent and magical working colleague. And Christine said, I've got an astrologer at the bottom of my garden. You know, in England we talk about having fairies at the bottom of your garden. Christine had an astrologer. So I went to see this astrologer to have my chart read. And she looked at it, she said, oh, I can't read this. And I thought, what's wrong with me? You know, you can imagine, oh dear, what's wrong? And she said, you need Howard to support us. So I went to see Howard. And Howard was going, well, there's something about power. And I thought, again, what's wrong? You know, what's the matter? what's wrong with me? And then he said something about childbirth and death, and I said, oh, I died in childbirth in my last life, because I'd had a near-death experience when I was having my daughter. And he went, oh, thank God for that. Now we can talk about things properly. And he said, you know, I didn't know who was coming to see me. You might have been somebody who'd never heard of past lives or anything. The minute you said that, we could have a proper conversation. And he said, I'm teaching karmic astrology at the weekend. Come. So I went, and I was right at the back, and every so often Howard would say, Judy, what do you think about that? And I'd say something, and in the end he said, oh, for goodness sake, come out here to the front, come and teach it with me. And there's still a recording of that around, and in fact it's much earlier than the recording says it is, about 10 years probably. And I realised I'd been doing karmic astrology without knowing what it was. And then I found there were other books on it, and then Howard got me to write a book on it. And that was that. But it was like, that was what I was. I wasn't an ordinary astrologer. I couldn't do, this is your character, this is your temperament. I could do, this is where you came from, you've got these patterns. And I remember asking a very eminent astrologer once who was giving a lecture. She was talking about, you've had problems with parents. You've got distance from parents. You don't expect to be loved by your father. And of course I put my hand up and said, well, where did that come from? How did this child get born without a past life? And it was an astrologer who didn't believe in past lives, and I got put in my place. But it to me, it's the only thing that makes sense, is that people have other lives, they bring the patterns with them.
So what do you think the main difference between karmic astrology and traditional astrology is?
I think it just is that, what is the soul here for? What lessons has the soul already learnt? What's the soul in the middle of learning? How does the soul want to evolve? Over a long spectrum of time, where the usual conventional astrology takes one life and you've got to do it all. I look at it with a much, much broader.
A karma azt jelenti, hogy az élet ok-okozati elv alapján működik. Leegyszerűsítve ezt úgy lehetne megmagyarázni, hogy minden tettnek megvan a maga következménye. Ami elindult a múltban, az hatást gyakorol a jelenre. Mindemellett azonban a karma titokzatos és összetett is. A gondolatok és az attitűdök éppen olyan erős karmát hozhatnak létre, mint a tényleges cselekvések, események. Amit most mozgásba hozunk, hatással lesz a jövőnkre ugyanúgy, mint a motivációink. A karma azokat a körülményeket is jelenti, amelyekre a lelkünknek szüksége van a spirituális fejlődéshez. Ezeket saját magunk teremtjük meg magunknak.
So how would you define yourself? Who are you? Who is Judy Hall?
This is a really difficult one, because still, if people ask me, what are you? I say I'm an astrologer. It's almost like that's my roots, that's where I come from. But I know that I do, a lot of my work is psychic. But people always say, oh, but you're a crystal person. And I say, yes, but I use crystals. They're one of my tools, as astrology is as well. But it's been quite a surprise to me, really, to end up more known for the astrology with crystals and past lives. Coming more in, I was an astrologer, then I wrote past life books and people knew about regression. Then I wrote the crystal books. And people say to me, oh, was it you? I said, that is all me. And I think that's the point. It's like there isn't one thing. I'm a lot of things altogether.
What I feel in your sense that you're reading people, you're a people reader, if you understand.
Yes.
So you don't just read the chart, you read the whole person, the aura, and through the higher. But, tell us about the process. How do you read a chart?
I think actually what I am is a soul reader, because I've always instinctively connected with the other person's higher self when I was reading something. And most of my work's done at a distance. And that's deliberate, because that means I can do soul-to-soul contact without their thoughts getting in the way. Because if somebody comes to me with a very strong, I was so-and-so, often Cleopatra and that sort of thing, that sort of level, that gets in the way. So therefore I preferred to work at a distance and to record things. And I always consciously went up to the higher self, because when you get a chart, it could have been a dog being born that day. It could be a person in Africa.
Or an event.
It could be an event. It could be somebody being born with all kinds of possibilities. And to know what level to read the chart, I think you need to talk to that person's soul, their higher self. Otherwise, you could spend a lot of time talking about something that wasn't relevant. So for me, it's a case of sitting down with a chart, talking to their higher self, and then basically I just open my mouth and out it comes. And I use the astrology as a way of getting into the past lives. And the past lives illuminate the present.
Yes. How would you define karma?
I don't think it's at all an eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth idea. I think it's a process, and it's ongoing, and it's everything that we put into being will have an action or a reaction or a response at some time. Now, it may be tomorrow, it may be 3 lives' time. I don't think that it's going to instantly happen, but it's something I always tell people is to remember you're not just dealing with a karma from the past, you're creating it now. So it is an ongoing process. I do believe we can work a lot of karma, and I really don't believe that if we're going to have a shift of consciousness, we can take all the old karma with us. I think that's the whole point of shifting consciousness. And I love the idea of the karma of grace, which says when we've done enough, then we can move on. So getting off the wheel of karma, I think takes work. I don't think you can shirk it. I don't think you can say, oh, I'm done with that, and just move on. But I do believe that if you do enough work, and if you get enough insights and literally enlightenment about your own reasons for doing it, you can move on.
Okay, so what do you think will happen on the solstice or around the solstice? What are your thoughts about that?
I actually don't think anything will happen at that point. I think it's part of a process of a shift of consciousness. My fear is that so many people think that the end of the world's coming, and what we think we can create, that, you know, I feel like that those of us who don't believe it's the end and who believe it's a shift of consciousness are actually trying to outweigh in this balance all those negative thoughts that other people are having. So I feel like I'm holding a space for something to change and to evolve. And I do wish everybody would put their thoughts to that instead of, oh, it's the end of the world. And it's the end of a cycle for me. And it's a shift of consciousness. But it's going to take time.
So what are your hopes for this new age?
Oh, I think it would be so wonderful if people got on with what, in my world, there's so much jealousy, there's so much envy and backstabbing in the crystal world, in the astrology world. And I keep looking at all of this and thinking, how can we have a better world if the people who are involved don't do it? So my hopes would be that all those people would suddenly think, let's all work together. Let's have a more loving world, a more peaceful world, and let's start with ourselves. And then that can spread out, and hopefully the rest of the world will benefit. But unless we evolve, and then each person shifts their consciousness, shifts their awareness to a higher place in the sense of another dimension where you get a bit more perspective on it, and you can see this is part of a process. That's what I hope we will achieve. But I really feel just at this particular moment as well that we are battling against this. The end of the world is nigh, or the people who are going, I'm going to transcend this planet, I'm going to float off. And I think, what's going to happen to the world? You know, I kind of feel we're the people who are down here trying to shift what is. You know, we can't float off and leave it all behind. Nice as it would be. Go and find a star to live on. Lovely. But it isn't. I don't think that's what's going to happen.
A kristályokat ősidők óta gyógyításra és az egyensúly megteremtésére használják. A rezonancián és a vibráción keresztül fejtik ki hatásukat. Ahhoz, hogy a kristályok gyógyító erejét a legteljesebb mértékben ki tudjuk használni, vagy tökéletesen képzettnek kell lennünk ezen a téren, vagy pedig a megfelelő képzéssel és gyakorlattal rendelkező szakember segítségét kell igénybe vennünk. A régi korok gyógyítói már azt is tudták, hogy bizonyos kristályok viselése energiával tölt fel, vagy megnyugtat. Vannak olyanok, amelyek képesek a túlműködő szervet megnyugtatni, míg az alulműködőt serkenteni. Vannak, amelyek ugyan gyorsan gyógyítanak, de okozhatnak problémákat, miközben mások sokkal lassabban hatnak.
This is a fire and ice crystal. Now, when I was first given one of these to hold, I thought, oh, it's a crackle quartz. And then I held it and I thought, oh, no, it's not just a crackle quartz. And it's been through fire, it's been heated, it's been frozen, plunged into cold water. But the underlying quartz is a very high vibration. It actually comes from a bit further down from where all the Lemurian crystals are coming from. And what I feel is this really symbolises what we're going through. It's full of rainbows, it's full of symbols. our souls have been through the fires, through the ice, and they've been transformed, or they're being transformed, into something beautiful that reflects a lot of light. So for me, this is one of the crystals that I use a lot, because I take with this light to Mother Earth, light to the heart of Mother Earth, to help the evolution and the shift of consciousness. But it is such a good symbol. If it was still the underlying high vibration quartz, which our souls are, it would be lovely. But those fires of transmutation have given it another quality. It's given it the ability to hold light and reflect light. So this is my symbol for the new age. The soul takes on different guises, different bodies, but it's always there. And you've only got to have a near-death experience to know that you are still there. Your body might be down there on the ground, and I've not only had two near-death experiences in this life. In my second near-death experience, I saw myself dying in childbirth previously, in a previous life, and I experienced the feelings of that as well. So you have that, and you know your soul is still there, your consciousness is still there. You can see yourself, you can tell them what they said when you were supposedly dead. And luckily there's a lot of doctors now doing research into that, and people are talking about it a lot more. When I had my near-death experience when my daughter was born, I hadn't heard of such things, but the doctor I had was a Sufi. I was so lucky. And he said, "Oh yes, dear, but I wouldn't talk about it if I was you." And I didn't say anything for probably the next, 5-10 years. And then Howard, the astrologer, took me to a talk by Margot Gray, who was talking about near-death experiences. I went, "Oh, I had one of those." And this is what came out of it. And it was like all of a sudden it was okay to talk about it. And now they're doing research into it, and a lot is being said. But I needed that experience not to convince me, because I knew I had one as a child. I needed to be able to say, I am not weird, I'm not strange, other people have this as well. And I can talk about it. And I write about it, it's in my books. And other people say, "Oh, it happened to me." Fine. I really feel that what we need to do is hold that space and that thought for things to shift, but to shift in a way that is evolution, not a revolution, not everything breaking down, that more consciousness, more light can actually come down to the earth. So there's a lot of talk at the moment about opening up this fifth dimensional portal, and people need to be doing that, yes, but bringing it to the earth. So my hope is that people will spend just a few minutes a day imaging, imagining, thinking, light is coming to the earth, awareness is coming, a higher consciousness is coming down here where we live, not up there in this place where we can float about. We can all leave our bodies and go and float off and have a wonderful time, but unless we bring it into the actual earth, it's not going to make any difference. So that's what I want people to do.
Minden napjegynek megvan a maga egyéni útja az önmegismeréshez, melyet a kristályok még inkább elősegítenek. A kristályok magukhoz vonzzák a jótékony energiákat, támogatják az adottságainkat, ellensúlyozzák a kevésbé vonzó tulajdonságainkat, segítenek ledolgozni a karmikus örökséget, és összekötnek minket a lelkünk legmélyebb rétegeivel.
While I was doing my MA in cultural astronomy and astrology, I did the archaeoastronomy kind of section of it, and I looked at my own local sacred landscape, and the question was, how does a landscape become sacred? Is there something inherent in the landscape? And so I'd been to so many sacred sites, and my dissertation is on my website if anybody wants to read it in heavy academic language. And that was about crystals and the horoscope. But before that, I did this essay on my local landscape, which I think is on the Astro Zero site, not on mine. And I was so frustrated because I couldn't write as much as I wanted, or in the way that I wanted. I had to do it academically, and I'm not very good at doing things academically, as I discovered. Well, I am, because I can do the research, but the language frustrates me in the way you have to do it. So I'd done all this research about what made landscape sacred. I'd always picked up stones, taken stones to sacred sites. I'd use them to journey to sacred sites if I couldn't go myself. And those two things were going along in parallel. They weren't really meeting, because academia doesn't really allow that. And then I wrote 101 Power Crystals for an American publisher. And he rang me up and he said, we think we'd like an atlas of where crystals are obtained from sacred sites. I went, you can't have that. And there was this sort of stunned silence, so I had to very quickly say, most people whose sites are sacred actually would think that was a desecration if you took the crystals from the actual site, although there are some exceptions. And so he said, well, could you write about the exceptions? You know, so Catalanite comes from an American sacred site. They made their peace pipes from it. Yes, I could, but there wouldn't be very many. I said, but what I can do is write about the journeying stones that take you to these sites. And, you know, this is one of them, Stonehenge. Now, these big stones came from fairly local. I live just down the road as well, by the way, so I'm here. These stones that you can barely see in this picture, in the middle, are blue stones from the Preseli Mountains in Wales, a long way away. So one of my questions always was, why bring stones in an age when they didn't have the wheel? Don't forget, Stone Age. All they could do was trundle them along in some form or another, or if you believe in Merlin, flying them. But why take those stones, plant them in the middle of a chalk field in Wiltshire? And when you look, Preseli was sacred long before Stonehenge was. The springs, the stones were sacred. They then brought them to Stonehenge. So there was an inherent property in the stone. And that's what I wanted to explore. So fortunately, Fairwinds were really open to this, and to this idea that not only could we talk about the sacred sites and the mythology, we could talk about the stones related. And the big breakthrough came when I could actually put in an exercise to use the stone to take you to the sacred site. And I had the most wonderful help from the people at Fairwinds, who all got the idea and loved the idea of journeying. So that's how we did it. But it was a fascinating process of actually me not selecting the sites. The sites selected themselves, because I had all sorts of places I was going to put in, and the sites in the end were very different to the ones I thought I would do. And when I looked at it, it traces this energy line all around the world. And obviously that was what the sites wanted. And in one of the very early journeys that I did with a Preseli bluestone, I did it with a group. We went up and flew to Preseli and sat on the top of the stones. I'll see if I can find a picture. And when we were there, we all saw this grid around the Earth, and we were all helping to heal the Earth's grid. And so that was one of the reasons. So these are the stones. This is the cave that you can sit in and meditate under all this bluestone. But when you're in there, it's like you're connected to all these sacred sites all around the world. And I believe that way, way back, humankind, inherently felt and knew and used those earth grid lines to keep the earth healthy, to travel with, in much the same way birds now use magnetic forces to travel. I think human beings used it, and these sites were planted in that very sacred spot because it was a collection of these earth energies coming together and healing could go out from there. And so when we do this, any of the journeys here, yes, we can do them for us, but we're doing them for the planet as well, which is why I persuaded them to change the subtitle. So initially it said, use crystals to access the power of sacred landscapes for personal transformation. And I said, no, please, can we say planetary transformation as well? Because that's what we're trying to do with this book, is yes, we're trying to help our own consciousness evolve, but also the earth is crying out for healing. So this is a form of earth healing. So there we are. This is how to heal the earth and yourself.
Which corresponds very, very well with the this coming new age that we are hoping.
Absolutely. It's like everything I'm doing is really preparing people. I feel like I'm trying to prise open a lid of something that has been shut down tight and used to be known and will be known again.